not going to do this to me. But what they ended up doing was they made me pay 1 year of loan payments, put it in a bank account, and have them do an automatic debit once a month, and told me, though, that I had to put my house up for sale. That was terrible. Well, the mistake they made was they didn't tell me that I had to price my house at a fair market price. So I priced my house about $150,000 higher than what anybody was going to pay for it. And so nobody bought it. But let me tell you what their scam was, Steve. They would give the son the money to go out and buy houses that they were foreclosing on people or pushing people out like me.
Wow.
And then he would sell those houses and flip them in a week or so and take all the equity.
Wow.
They weren't charging him loan fees. They gave him unlimited stuff. And it was terrible. I never understood it for about 2 years, what was going on. But they all went to prison.
Right.
But let me just tell you, I pray for them. I'm not vindictive. I'm not vengeful. I just pray that they get their lives straight. But at the end of that testimony that I gave where I asked for prayer, you and Fred came up to me and introduced yourselves and said, hey, we didn't know you were a business dude. Would you help us? And I said, help you do what? And you said, well, we have a barber shop, and we've just gotten our license to have a barber school. Would you help us grow our school? And I said, I would love to. So y'all took me to lunch, and I didn't want you to have to do that, but y'all insisted. And then I came out to your shop, and here's what I encountered. When I came out to your shop, you have 9 chairs here, and you and Fred were standing there, and the very first thing that y'all said to me was, could you get us into prisons and rehab centers? And I got to tell you, I did a Willis. What you mean, Willis? I didn't have a clue what you were talking about because I didn't know what I was getting ready to learn. What I learned right then, I said, why are you asking me to do that? And you said, well, that's where we learned to cut. That's where we started. And you proceeded to tell me that 8 of the 9 chairs in your shop on that day were returning citizens, felons, men that had been in prison, including you and Fred. So that's how I got started with knowing what was going on. And when you said, will you get us into prisons and rehab centers, over the next 6 or 7 months, I started working with you to help you grow your barber school. And I got you into a government program called the WIA. It was a workforce development program through the workforce, and it was the WIA Act of 1994, I think it was, and it was where hardship populations can get financial assistance for career development, but you had to be approved by the workforce as a qualified vendor. And once we got that done, scholarship financial assistance was offered to people that wanted to cut hair. And then we started going into prisons and introducing everybody to the barbershop. We developed the brochure. John Prince, my friend that's long retired, he was about 76 or 7 years old then. He was a New York Madison Avenue advertising executive. And he had a heart for what we were doing. So he developed the brochure. And yeah, what a wonderful brochure, you know. And so I remember I took all the pictures and I showed their family atmosphere, and then we did a table mount that has pictures on it. It's right over there. And so we started going into prisons and it just letting people know that you're here. And I'll never forget this though. When you said that day, can I get you into prisons and rehab centers? I said, why? And you said, well, you know, when those men and women get out, they're going to have a hard time. And we just want them to know that we are here for them, to help them get a new direction in their life, to feel that somebody cares about them. And besides, some of them might want to work here. Some of them might want to learn to cut. Some of them might want to go to the school because that's where we learn. So, Steve, can you tell me a little bit of the background that I've led you into here on I guess we should start with, how'd you go to prison? I mean, what was going on in your life? What got you into prison?
Well, you know, I was a child of a single parent, and seeking direction, seeking direction in life, and it's been a product of my environment. You know, living in the projects. You know, me and my 3 or 4 friends, none of us had fathers, and we just left to our own devices. And the Bible tells you, a child left to himself brings his mother and father to shame. You know, so not having that guidance we sought guidance in the criminal element where we lived at. We became fast criminals. Selling drugs, armed robbery. Getting high. No goals for the future. And going from bad to worse. My mom raised me right. I was raised in the church. I feel like she did the best she could do. But I just understand, when children don't have no guidance, especially when a boy don't have a man mentoring and guiding them, it makes a big difference. Children fall prey to the predators in society. And oftentimes the predator is a guy who's selling drugs, a guy who wants you to buy his drugs and sell them. We fell into that, getting high and drinking and, doing adult things at young ages,
How old were you when you had your first drink and got high? Or two different questions. First drink, and then how old were you when you got high?
Well, I don't remember how old I was for my first drink, but I do remember that when I first got high, I was probably about 7 years old.
7 years old?
Yeah, my uncle came back from Vietnam. And a lot of those guys, when they came back from Vietnam, they was hooked on weed and dope. But they got high over there. And so from my understanding, it grew over there right out in the fields where they were at, And my uncle, when I was about 6 or 7, 5 years old, my uncle came back from Vietnam, and my mom used to take me to my grandmother's house on the weekends to get my hair cut with my uncle.
Your uncle that came from Vietnam cut your hair?
Yeah,
Wow, I never heard this part before.
Right. My uncle, so he used to cut my mom would take me to his house, which was my grandmother's house, and my mom would say, go get your hair cut. And she would go in the other room with my uncle, my aunts and grandmother, and I would go in the room with my uncle. And my other cousins, we all would be in the room, and my uncle would be in there smoking weed. And so it's about 4 or 5 of us little kids in there while my uncle smoking weed. And then he's cutting our hair. So then he started getting us high while he's cutting our hair. Well, I was like 6, 7 years old. So I started getting high by default. It wasn't something I wanted to do. It was something I was just led into by my uncle. I was about 6 or 7 years old.
I'm sorry, Steve. Wow. So you were 6 or 7. You were getting in that environment. So then what happened after that as you started going further astray?
So then as I developed, when I got older, I started selling weed myself in high school. Right? And after I got put out of school, a year I got caught selling weed to another student. And they put me out of school for a whole year for selling marijuana in Lake Taylor High School. They tried to put me in a rehab program, but I told them when they had a counseling session with me, they wanted to find out what my problem was. But I had so much sense. I was so smart, I was dumb. So I was so dumb, I told them I don't have a problem. I just like smoking weed. So they told me, well, we can't help you. You just got to be put out of school for a year.
What'd you do during that year?
For that year, my older brother worked construction, doing cement, concrete construction, and I was like 15 and a half. And he took me to work with him and had me doing grown men work at 15 and a half, doing construction and concrete work.
I gotta tell everybody something here. Steve is cut like a brick mason. I mean, he is a powerful, strong man. And I never knew that you did brickwork at 16 years old. That explains something, because you're a man not to be reckoned with here, or how's the expression go? You better be careful when you mess with Steve, yeah. Okay, well, wow, I didn't know that. So you told me along the way, I've heard your testimony multiple times and we've hung out together, but at what point did you start getting into gang activity?
I started getting into gang activity, I want to say, when I was about 17. When I was about 17, me and a couple of guys, we wouldn't really call it a gang, but hindsight looking back, it was a gang. It was like I had a best friend, and we met these other guys that was from New York, a couple of guys, one guy from New York, another guy that lived in the neighboring area where we lived in the project. They lived in a housing area, but we lived in the projects. But we met those guys, and we became fast friends. And we had a deep loyalty to one another. We would die for each other. So essentially it became a gang. But we didn't recruit people like gangs do. we just were satisfied with each other.
But there are about 7 of you?
Well, 5, about 5, hardcore guys, 5 of us that was really die for each other.
Did y'all get into any criminal activity together?
We did criminal activity, but our only goal with criminal activity was just to get money to get high.
Mm-hmm.
We didn't look to rob a bank or nothing, just trying to get rich. We just wanted to get high, and we primarily smoked weed and snorted a little bit of cocaine and drank a little bit of beer. But the marijuana was our primary drug of choice.
You said something to me last week that was in the interview that never got recorded about families without a father.
Right.
And how that's really where the whole problem lies.
Right.
Can you talk about that for a second? Because let me just tell you, one of the things that I'm really working on is after being in prisons almost 440 times now, and you got me started, Steve, I love you. You changed my life. I never knew that I was going to go this direction,
right,
to where I was going to dedicate my life to going into prisons and trying to help the families rebuild themselves. And what I've learned from it is the very best way to stop recidivism is to get to the kids before they screw up in the first place.
Yep.
But the problem is that I want to talk to you about, see what your thoughts are. You can't get to the kids until they screw up. Right. You just can't go into families. You can meet some families if they go to churches and do different things, but we're not social workers. We just can't go to a family and say, hey, we need to intervene here.
Right.
But what I've learned that we can do is we can go into prisons and we can give a message. And maybe only 1 out of 1,000 is going to pick up on the message, but there are people that want to come out of prison and go back to their families and do right by their families, but they don't know what to do because they're like generational. Like one of the themes I've got is it's 85%, 95%, 70%. Right. 85% of all the children whose parents are incarcerated or have been, they're going to see bars too.
Yeah.
But 95% of everybody that's incarcerated, they get out.
Right.
But 70% of the ones that get out can't make it.
Right.
They go back. So, Steve, you are a role model. How long ago did you go into prison?
Oh, wow.
How old are you now?
I'm 49.
And you've been out for 26 years?
Yep. I went to prison when I was 19.
That's the math. So, Steve, we dropped off that you were 16 working at a brick mason,
right,
but you went into prison at 19.
Right.
You served a little over 4 years.
Right.
You got out when you were 23. Right. So you've been out for 26 years.
Yes,
so let's talk a little bit more about what led into it. But I'm telling you, you're a man that has been changing other people's lives since you found the truth yourself. And so we're going to get to there in a minute. But so what happened after you got into the brick mason stuff? But I did ask you about your statement on being without a father.
Right. Well, the absence of the father, right? It puts a search. A young man, when you don't have a father, is searching for a father. If he can't find a father, he's searching for a father figure, somebody to pattern himself after. Because the average young boy looks at his mother and knows he can't be her. He's not supposed to be her. So just normal, he's looking for somebody. Who am I supposed to be? We all need roadmaps in life. We're all seeking for what's the next step. So I was seeking for the next step. So me and my friends, we became almost surrogate fathers for one another. We listened to one another, and we followed one another's advice, the same way a boy would do with his father. But we led each other astray, of course, because a kid can't be a father, So here you have it. You got a boy trying to be a man, but all his role models are either his friends or the pimps and the gangsters in the neighborhood. 9 times out of 10, he's going to become that. If he don't have a YMCA to go to, or somebody or an uncle that can take him under his wing, he's going to become like what he sees. Now, one thing I got to tell you about my uncle. My uncle started me getting high, but my uncle also was a catalyst for me to cut hair. Because the crazy thing, but my uncle was cutting my hair and cutting my cousin's hair. One day, when I was 11 years old, I went to my uncle's house to get a haircut. My uncle told me, I'm not cutting your hair anymore. He told me and my cousin, y'all got to cut each other's hair now. Then we're like, what you mean? He said, the clippers are in the bathroom. Go cut each other hair.